My name's Carol, just a regular high school teacher with a love for old books and a quiet life. My world changed when I met David at the school fair. He was the main sponsor, the kind of guy who makes things happen without making a fuss about it. He had that quiet confidence and a smile that could light up the gloomiest day. It started with a thank you note I sent him for his generous contribution. He replied with invitation for coffee, saying it was the least he could do for the hard work we teachers were putting in. I remember walking into that coffee shop, my heart racing a bit, thinking, Carol, it's just coffee, not a moon landing. David was easy to talk to. We chatted about everything, from books to the best pizza in town. He had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. Before we knew it, coffee turned into dinner, and dinners turned into weekends together. A few months in, he wanted me to meet his mother, Mrs. Winters. She's a bit old school, but she'll love you, he said. I was a bundle of nerves, wanting to make a good impression. I picked out my nicest dress and spent more time on my hair than I'd like to admit. The moment we walked into Mrs. Winters' living room, I felt her eyes on me like a hawk. So, you're the teacher David won't stop talking about, she said, her voice colder than I expected. I smiled, reached out for a handshake, but she just nodded, her eyes scanning me from head to toe. Dinner was an experience. Mrs. Winters had this way of talking where every compliment sounded like she was doing you a favor. That's an interesting dress, dear. Vintage shop? She said, her eyebrow raised just so. I felt my cheeks burn, but I managed a small thank you. It's one of my favorites. David squeezed my hand under the table, a silent hang in there, but the digs kept coming. A teacher, huh? Must be tough dealing with kids all day. Hope you don't bring that school discipline home. She chuckled, sipping her wine like it was the last one on earth. I really tried, to keep the conversation light, but it was like dancing on thin ice. David changed the topic, talked about his work, the weather, anything to steer away from the silent judgments being passed across the table. Fast forward a few months, and there I was, in a white dress, saying "I-do" to the man who made it all worth it. The wedding was a blur of laughter, tears, and dancing. Mrs. Winters was there, of course, dressed to the nines and handing out opinions like candy. Lovely ceremony, though I'd have gone for real flowers, not these. What are these, dear plastic? She said, eyeing the decorations. We moved into David's home soon after. It was a beautiful place, cozy and welcoming, except for the chill I felt whenever Mrs. Winters was around. David assured me it would get better, that she just needed time to get used to me. Moving into David's home felt like stepping into a new world, one where every corner held a memory of Mrs. Winters' reign. It wasn't long before I got introduced to her morning ritual, the infamous inspection. It started like clockwork every morning. The minute the clock struck 10, the front door would creak open, and in she'd walk like the queen of her castle. Mrs. Winters had this air about her, like she owned every inch of the place. Her first move was always to slip on those pristine white gloves, snapping them tight like she was about to perform surgery. "Morning, Carol, dear," she'd say, her voice dripping with a sweetness that never reached her eyes. "Just here to help you keep the place up to David's standards." I'd force a smile, my hands clenching the dish towel a bit too tight. "Thanks, Mrs. Winters, but I've got it covered." She'd tut and shake her head, already walking towards the living room. "Nonsense, dear. You're new to this. It takes a keen eye to keep a house like this." And then it'd begin. She'd glide from room to room, that white handkerchief in her hand sweeping over every surface. It was like watching some twisted ballet, her movements precise, calculated. "You see here, dear," she'd say, holding up the handkerchief, now with a faint smudge of dust. "This is what I'm talking about. Can't have David living in a dustbin, can we?" I bit my tongue, the words "it's not a dustbin" sitting at the tip, but I swallowed them down. David had asked me to play nice, and I was trying, really trying. The worst was the kitchen. That's my territory, I love cooking, always have. But she'd march in there like a general, inspecting the troops. "These pots aren't going to clean themselves, dear," she'd cluck, her fingers running over the rim of a saucepan I'd just washed. "It's clean, Mrs. Winters, I'd insist," my voice steady despite the storm inside. She'd hum, a sound that said, "I've heard better jokes." Well, we have different standards, I suppose. David's used to a certain way, you see. I'd nod, grinding my teeth so hard I was afraid I'd chip a tooth. It was the same every day. The living room, the bedrooms, even the bathrooms weren't spared. By the time she'd leave, I'd feel like a deflated balloon, all my energy sapped by her constant nitpicking. David would come home, all smiles and hugs, and I'd put on a brave face. "How was your day, love?" He'd ask, and I'd muster the brightest smile I could. "Oh, you know the usual." Mrs. Winters stopped by to give some helpful tips. I'd say, the word helpful taking all my acting skills to sound even remotely sincere. He'd frown, that wrinkle appearing between his brows. "I'll talk to her, Carol. She means, well, she just has her way, you know." I knew. Oh, how I knew. But what I didn't know was how long I could play this game, smiling through the inspections, biting back the words that screamed inside me. Saturday mornings should have been about lazy breakfasts and staying in pajamas till noon. But in our house, they were about one thing, the dreaded family dinner. It wasn't just any dinner. It was the weekly performance, with Mrs. Winters as the stern judge and me. Well, I was the hopeful contestant, always falling short. I'd be up at the crack of dawn, the kitchen my battlefield. Pots and pans clanged, the oven roared, and spices danced in the air. It was my attempt, week after week, to impress the unimpressible, Mrs. Winters. David, bless his heart, would stumble in half awake. "Need any help, love?" he'd ask, rubbing sleep from his eyes. I'd shoo him away with a spoon covered in sauce. "Go get ready. Your mom will be here any minute, and you know how she is about punctuality." He'd chuckle, a sound that held a mix of love and a hint of worry. "Yeah, if you're on time, you're late, that's her motto." The clock hadn't even struck 6 when we'd hear the sharp rap on the door. Showtime. Mrs. Winters and Mr. Winters would step in, him with his warm smile, her with her eyes already scanning for faults. "Smells good in here, Carol. What's on the menu today?" Mr. Winters would always start off with a compliment, his genuine kindness a stark contrast to his wife. Before I could answer, Mrs. Winters would chime in, her voice slicing through the warmth. "I hope it's not that casserole from last time. Remember, David, how you had that stomachache?" David would wince, a silent plea in his eyes, begging me not to retort. "Mom, Carol's been working hard all day. Let's just enjoy the meal, yeah?" Dinner would be a tense affair. Mr. Winters would heap praises, his delicious "dear," and "you've outdone yourself, Carol," battling against Mrs. Winters's relentless critique. "This chicken is dry, dear. You really must learn to keep an eye on the oven," she'd say, pushing her barely touched plate away. I'd grit my teeth, forcing a polite, "I'll remember that for next time, Mrs. Winters." David would try to lighten the mood, his jokes a desperate attempt to bridge the widening gap at the table, but it was like throwing pebbles into a chasm, hoping for a bridge. And then, just when I thought I'd survived the worst, dessert would come, and with it, a fresh wave of critiques. "Is this pie supposed to be this? Crunchy?" Mrs. Winters would ask, the word crunchy sounding more like catastrophics. I'd swallow the lump in my throat, my reply a mix of wariness and defiance. "It's a family recipe, Mrs. Winters. It's always a hit." She'd raise an eyebrow, her gaze saying clearer than words, "Not in this family, dear." As they'd leave, Mr. Winters would give me a warm, encouraging hug, whispering, "Don't mind her, Carol. We all love your cooking." But Mrs. Winters's parting words would always be a reminder of the invisible scoreboard where I was always trilling. "Try harder next time, dear. A happy husband is a well-fed husband." The door would close behind them, and I'd stand there, a mix of frustration and defeat simmering inside. David would wrap his arms around me, his silence a mix of apology and solidarity. "It's just one night a week, love. We'll get through this," he'd whisper, his words a lifebuoy in the stormy seas of Saturday dinners. The news of the pregnancy should have been a moment of pure joy, a new chapter for David and me. But amidst the excitement, a shadow lingered, the thought of Mrs. Winters's reaction. David was over the moon, grinning ear to ear. "We're going to be parents. Carol, can you believe it?" he'd say, wrapping me in a hug so tight it felt like nothing could go wrong. But the first time Mrs. Winters dropped by after hearing the news, the air was thick with tension. I braced myself for her words, hoping maybe, just maybe, this new life might soften her. "Well, I do hope you've read up on parenting, Carol. It's not all cooing and cuddling, you know, she started, her tone as sharp as ever. I bit back a sigh, a fake smile plastered on. We're thrilled, Mrs. Winters. And yes, we're reading a lot, getting ready for the baby. She sniffed, peering at me like she was assessing if I was up to the task. Well, make sure you follow the right books. Some of these modern ideas are just nonsense. David squeezed my hand under the table, a silent message of support. But as the weeks turned into months, the pressure didn't ease. Mrs. Winters' visits became a litany of advice and thinly veiled criticism. You're not eating enough greens, Carol. You want the baby to be healthy, don't you? She'd say, eyeing my plate like it was a crime scene. Or make sure you're not being too lazy. Exercise is important, but don't overdo it. You wouldn't want to harm the baby. It was a no-win situation. Do too little and I was careless. Do too much and I was reckless. The breaking point came one quiet afternoon. Mrs. Winters had just left. Her parting words, make sure the nursery is painted soon. You don't want the baby coming home to an unready house, ringing in my ears. David found me in the nursery, the paint samples scatter around, tears streaming down my face. Carol, what's wrong? Talk to me, love, he said, his voice laced with worry. I let it all out. The frustration, the hurt, the exhaustion. I can't do this anymore, David. It's like I'm walking on eggshells in my own home. Your mother. It's just too much. David's face hardened, a rare sight. I'll talk to her, Carol. This ends now. You and the baby are my priority. And he did. That evening, I heard hushed, tense voices from the living room. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear. David was setting boundaries, fighting for our little family. The next day, Mrs. Winters' visits stopped. No more morning inspections, no more veiled insults. It was a relief, yet the silence felt heavy, charged with unsaid words and unresolved tensions. David was quieter too, his smiles not reaching his eyes. She's my mom, Carol. It hurts, but you and the baby come first. Always? I held him close, the future uncertain but our resolve clear. We were a team, and we'd face whatever came next, together. 7 years flew by since Lily, our little bundle of joy, came into our world. David was a doting father, his love for Lily shining in his every action. My father-in-law, a gentle soul, adored his granddaughter, his face lighting up with every giggle and every new word Lily spoke. But there was a chill that never thawed, a coldness that lingered in the air whenever Mrs. Winters was around. She kept her distance from Lily, her words as sharp as ever. Children should be seen and not heard, she'd say, dismissing Lily's cheerful chatter as nothing more than noise. Lily, with her big heart and innocent eyes, couldn't understand why her grandma wasn't like the ones in her storybooks. She'd try, in her own sweet way, to win over Mrs. Winters. Look, Grandma, I drew this for you, she'd say, holding up a crayon masterpiece. Mrs. Winters would barely glance at it, her voice devoid of warmth. That's nice, dear. Now go play, Grandma's busy. But Lily never lost her spirit. She found her passion early, cooking. The kitchen was her kingdom, her small hands skillfully mixing, stirring, and baking. Every weekend was a new adventure, her culinary creations a source of pride for us. Look, Daddy, I made cookies, she'd exclaim, her face beaming as she presented her latest work. David would scoop her up, his laughter filling the room. Chef Lily, you have outdone yourself. These are delicious. Even my father-in-law couldn't resist Lily's kitchen magic. My little chef, he'd say, his eyes twinkling as he took a bite, you'll be running your own restaurant in no time. Their words were a balm to Lily's soul, a stark contrast to the cold indifference she received from Mrs. Winters. But children have a resilience, a way of focusing on the love they receive, not the affection withheld. One evening, as Lily set the table, her latest culinary creation taking center stage, she looked up at me, her eyes serious. Mom, why doesn't Grandma like my cooking? Doesn't she like food? I knelt beside her, my heart aching with the innocence of her question. Sweetheart, Grandma, she's just different. But your cooking is wonderful, and Daddy and Grandpa and I, we love it. That's what matters, right? Lily nodded, her smile returning, the shadow of Mrs. Winters' indifference brushed aside by the love of those who mattered most. The Christmas invite from Mrs. Winters was a surprise, but Lily's excitement at the chance to showcase her cooking made us accept. Together, we baked gingerbread and apple pie, her little hands working diligently, her eyes sparkling with pride. "Grandma and everyone are gonna love these, right, Mom?" she'd ask, her confidence as warm as the oven. "Absolutely, sweetheart," I'd reassure her, though a part of me dreaded the unpredictable tides of Mrs. Winters' approval. Arriving at the bustling house, we placed our dishes on the grand Christmas table, an array of colors and smells that promised a feast. Lily's face was a picture of joy and anticipation as we mingled, catching up with relatives we hadn't seen in ages. But as we settled at the table, ready to share the meal and the joy of the season, Lily's excitement turned to confusion, then distress. "Mom, where's our gingerbread and pie?" she whispered, her small voice trembling. I scanned the table, a sinking feeling in my stomach. Our dishes were missing. Mrs. Winters at the head of the table was holding court, her laughter ringing out clear and sharp. I approached her, my voice firm but polite. "Mrs. Winters, the dishes Lily and I brought, where are they?" Her laughter cut through the festive hum, cold and piercing. "Oh, those." "I tossed them out, dear. We can't risk serving just anything to our guests, can we?" The room fell silent, the air heavy with shock and disbelief. Lily's eyes filled with tears, her dream of sharing her love through her cooking dashed in an instant. "But I made them for everyone. I worked so hard," she managed to say, her voice a fragile whisper against the weight of her grandmother's harsh words. Mrs. Winters shrugged, her eyes void of any warmth. "Well, dear, not everything made with love is fit for the table. Better safe than sorry." That was the last straw. David, who had always been the bridge between his mother and our family, stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor loudly. "Mom, that's cruel. How could you?" he said, his voice steady, but loaded with an anger I had rarely seen in him. "Lily poured her heart into those dishes. She wanted to share something special, and you just threw it away like it was nothing." Mrs. Winters' smile faltered, her eyes widening in surprise. This was not the mild-mannered son she was used to. "David, I was just—" "No, Mom, you went too far. Disrespecting Carol is one thing, but hurting Lily, your own granddaughter, that's something I can't and won't forgive." He interrupted, his disappointment and anger clear and unwavering. The room was still, the festive air replaced by a tense silence. Mrs. Winters sat there, the impact of David's words hitting her. She had expected compliance, maybe a few whispered complaints, but not this. Not her usually gentle son standing up to her, defending his family with such resolve. The air was thick with tension as we left Mrs. Winters' house, the festive lights mocking us with their cheer. The sound of Lily's quiet sobs was louder than the Christmas carols that played in the background. David's hand was firm on my shoulder, a silent pillar of strength. As we reached the door, Mrs. Winters' voice broke through the heavy silence, her tone desperate, a stark contrast to the cold disdain she'd shown earlier. "Please don't go. I'm sorry," she stammered, her eyes wet with tears that seemed out of place on her stern face. David stopped, turning back to face his mother. The room held its breath. "Sorry. Now you're sorry." His voice was low, but it cut through the room, sharp and clear. "You humiliated your own granddaughter, Mom. You broke her heart. There's no sorry that can fix that." Mrs. Winters' sobs grew louder, her composure shattered, but it was too late. The damage was done, and the cracks too deep to mend. In the tense silence that followed, Mr. Winters stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. His voice, when he spoke, was calm, but it carried a weight that silenced the room. "I can't sit here and pretend this is okay, Martha." Not this time. Without another word, he turned and walked away, his steps heavy with the burden of a decision long overdue. The room felt colder, the festive warmth snuffed out by a single act of unkindness. One by one, the guests stood up, their faces somber, their goodbyes muted and brief. The festive gathering was unraveling, the threads of family and friendship coming undone. As the last guest left, the door closing with a soft click, the magnitude of what had happened settled in the room. Mrs. Winters sat alone at the table, her sobs the only sound in the house that moments ago was filled with laughter and chatter. Outside, the cold air bit at our cheeks, a stark reminder of the warmth we'd left behind. David's arm was around Lily, her small body leaning into his for comfort. We walked in silence, the weight of the night pressing down on us. Back home, as we sat in the living room, the Christmas tree lights twinkling softly, a sense of peace settled over us. It was a fragile peace, one born from the chaos of the night, but it was ours. Lily, nestled between us, her tears dried, but the hurt still fresh in her eyes, looked up and whispered, "Are we okay, Mom, Dad?" David hugged her closer, a silent vow in his embrace. "We're more than okay, sweetheart. We're together, and that's all that matters." And in that moment, as we held each other, the trials of the night receded, leaving behind a simple truth. Family wasn't just about shared blood or shared names. It was about shared love, shared pain, and the shared resolve to stand together when the world seemed to crumble around us. The fallout from that chaotic Christmas dinner rippled through our family like a shockwave. The house felt different, quieter, the air still tinged with the remnants of that night's revelations. David was somber, his usual cheer dimmed by the events that had unfolded. "I'm sorry, Carol," he said one evening as we sat in the living room, the only sound the ticking of the clock. "I should have stood up for you and Lily sooner. I let it go on for too long." I reached for his hand, feeling the roughness of his palm against mine. "You did what you thought was best, David. We both did. But now we know better. We move forward, together." He nodded, the lines on his face softening. But the true shock came the next day when Mr. Winters showed up at our doorstep, his eyes weary, a deep frown creasing his forehead. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. David opened the door wider, concern etched on his face. "Of course, Dad. Is everything okay?" Mr. Winters took a seat, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since Christmas," he started, his voice trailing off. We waited, the tension thick in the air. Finally he looked up, his eyes meeting ours. "I can't believe Martha could be so cruel, so heartless to her own granddaughter. I never imagined she could go that far." David shifted in his seat, the weight of his father's words heavy on his shoulders. "Dad, Mr. Winters raised a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "No, David, I should have seen it, should have done something sooner. But I didn't, and now I'm thinking about a divorce." The word hung in the air, heavy and unexpected. Divorce wasn't a word thrown around lightly in our family, and coming from Mr. Winters, it was a bombshell. "Divorce!" David echoed, disbelief coloring his tone. Mr. Winters nodded, a resolute look on his face. "I can't be with someone who shows such cruelty, not just to Carol and Lily, but to her own family. I've turned a blind eye for too long, hoping things would change. But after what happened at Christmas, I can't ignore it anymore." We sat in silence, each lost in our thoughts. The decision was monumental, not just for Mr. Winters, but for all of us. It was a line in the sand, a declaration that enough was enough. "Whatever you decide, Dad, we're here for you," David said, his voice firm. "You've always been there for us, and that won't change." Mr. Winters smiled, a weary, sad smile. "Thank you, son. That means more than you know." In the days that followed, our family found a new rhythm, a new way of being. The shadows of the past lingered, but so did the promise of a fresh start, a chance to build something stronger and more resilient from the broken pieces. Lily's laughter returned, filling the house with a warmth that pushed back the darkness. And as we sat together, the three of us with Mr. Winters now a more frequent visitor, I realized that family wasn't about tolerating the intolerable. It was about standing up for each other, about choosing love and respect over blood and tradition. In the quiet moments, when the night wrapped the world in its embrace, I'd look at my little family and know that, despite the storms we'd weathered, we were stronger together. And no amount of cruelty or coldness could ever change that.
My life's kinda been like a whirlwind tour of the world's kitchen, only with more passport stamps and less sanity. Name's Kira, fresh into the third decade of my ride on this rock, and I've made a living out of breathing in the spices and dishing out the experience through my vlog. So it was just another steamy day in Thailand, with me elbow deep in noodles and peanuts, learning the ropes of an insane pad thai from this little old dude who could have been Yoda's culinary cousin. That's when this tall drink of water, Mark, stumbled into my life, literally. He tripped over a foldable chair trying to get a better look at the pan and nearly ended our romance before it started by nearly sending me headfirst into my own sizzle. "Whoa, sorry about that," he chuckled, hauling the chair out of the disaster zone. "Just trying to see how the magic happens." "You could say it's all in the wrist action," I said, giving the noodles a flamboyant toss. "Careful there, wouldn't want to add roadkill tourist to today's menu." Mark laughed, all easy charm and crinkly-eyed smiles. "Mark," he said, extending a hand once he was sure it was safe. "Kira, the noodle whisperer," I replied, giving his hand a quick shake before diving back into my culinary ballet. And there it was. We clicked quicker than a camera shutter. He was from the States, here to escape the office walls and spreadsheets, which, to me, sounded like a jailbreak from Adulting 101. We spent the week flitting between street food stalls and ancient temples, with him filming the chaos and me explaining the dance between tangy, sweet, spicy, and umami. When the week ended, we swapped digits. Said our "see you laters" 'cause goodbyes were for people who had less faith in cheap international texting plans. Months sped past like high-speed train rides, nights spent spilling our thoughts via texts that turned into calls that turned into video chats. Then one day, he just showed up at my doorstep with a ring and a question. We tied the knot 6 months later. Yeah, just like that. Bam. Married. Things took a nosedive after a while. Forget the lovey-dovey honeymoon phase, it was like we'd skipped straight to bickering old couple mode. I'd be coming home from some corner of the world, my brain still buzzing with the new flavors and faces I'd met, and all Mark could do was hassle me about not being normal. "You know what a normal wife does, Kira?" That's how he'd start, every single time. "She cooks, she cleans, she doesn't jet off every other week." Sitting there at the kitchen table, I'd toss my stuff down and give him a look. "Seriously, Mark? You think I just flit around for kicks? This is work. My work." To him, it was like my job was make-believe. "Work? You think filming some street food and yapping about it online is work? Get real. Get a proper job." Each word stung. "It pays, doesn't it?" I'd shoot back. But that was never enough. Once, I was up against a deadline, videos needed cutting, articles needed writing, and guess what? Mark barged into the office and dropped a bomb. "The house is a mess, Kira. When you gonna clean up?" I couldn't believe my ears. "You've got hands, Mark. Use 'em." Defying him only cranked his gears worse. "What, and let you loaf around editing videos all day? Is that what you call pulling your weight?" Freeloader. That's what he called me. In our own home. "I'm out there busting my tail to bring home the bacon," I told him, standing my ground. "And this freeloader you're talking to just paid off the last of your student loans with her hobby." But it was like talking to a brick wall. All he saw was a wife who wasn't fitting his mold, who wasn't, I don't know, June Cleaver or somebody. And the worst part? Instead of getting it through his thick skull that we were partners in this, he doubled down. "Why don't you make something of yourself, huh?" He'd sneer. "Get a job with a desk, something steady." "I am making something of myself," I shouted, slammed my laptop shut so hard I'm surprised it didn't break. "You think it's not a real job because I'm not miserable like you?" Normal was his favorite word. Bite to eat, 9 to 5, white picket fence, the whole boring shebang. Drove me nuts. But as for me, I wasn't about to let go of my passport or my dreams, no matter what he thought a wife should be. Beatrice, Mark's mom and my mother-in-law, was the kind of person whose idea of a surprise visit was her showing up in your living room ranting about something you did or didn't do. Living just a couple of streets away, she considered our house part of her daily walking route, which basically meant she'd drop by whenever she felt like it. So there I was one Tuesday, laptop open, trying to get some work done on my latest travel vlog. You could almost set your watch by Beatrice. Sure enough, like clockwork, The front door swings open, it's never locked for Beatrice, and there she was. "Working on your little videos again, huh?" Her voice dripped with disdain. She didn't even say hello. I sighed, trying not to look as interrupted as I felt. "Hey, Beatrice. Yeah, gotta keep on top of it." She tossed her oversized purse onto the couch and made herself comfortable. "You know, when I was your age, I was raising kids, keeping a spick-and-span house. Didn't have time for hobbies." Her words plucked at my already frayed nerves. "It's not a hobby, Beatrice. This is my job." Beatrice snorted as she peered over her glasses, which she only wore to make a point. "Call it what you want. When's the last time you cooked your husband a proper dinner? Or are you too busy working on these little trip films?" I bristled. She knew how to hit where it hurt. "Mark eats just fine. I don't hear him complaining." "Oh, he complains, all right. Just not to you." She smirked and picked at a non-existent speck of dust on her trousers. I wanted to scream. Instead, I shut my laptop, a little too hard, and stood up. "I'm right here, Beatrice. And I'm working. Bringing in money. Isn't that important too?" She huffed, getting up. "Well, if you won't listen to me, maybe you'll listen to the pastor. We're having dinner tonight, and he'll set you straight." I was dumbfounded. "Dinner? Tonight? Beatrice, I have deadlines." "Not anymore. You can put off your deadlines to save your marriage. I've seen the signs, Kira. It's now or never." Fuming, I barely managed to keep a civil tone. "Fine. But this is our life, not just mine or Mark's. Don't you forget that." Beatrice smirked, triumphant. "We'll see," she said, and plucked her purse up again. 6 o'clock. And wear something nice for a change. After the door clicked shut, the silence thudded in my ears like the after-ringing of a bell. So much for a quiet workday at home. Now I had to deal with a dinner ambush and a pastor mediating my marriage? Great, just great. Cooking had always been my kind of therapy, mixing flavors like I mixed colors on a canvas. But here came Beatrice, marching into my sanctuary like she owned the place, ready to burn it down with a single glance. That Thursday, I was in the zone, chopping vegetables for a stir-fry, another recipe I'd picked up from my travels. The door flew open and Beatrice waltzed in, all frowns and scowls. "What's that smell?" was the greeting I got. No hello, as usual. I kept the irritation out of my voice, doing my best to stay polite. "Stir-fry. It's a recipe from Thailand," I replied, hoping she'd just sit down and maybe, just maybe, keep her opinions to herself for once. But no dice. "Can't you make anything normal? Real food?" Beatrice scoffed, planting her hands on her hips. I could feel the anger bunched up at the base of my throat, but I swallowed it down, trying to preserve some peace. "I just thought we'd try something new," I said. Mark poked at the food with a fork like he was testing if a piece of roadkill was ready to be scraped off the pavement. "New? I've seen better-looking garbage." "You tell her, Mark," Beatrice egged him on, her arms crossed over her chest. "Yeah, Kira, stick to what you know, which isn't much," he chuckled. His mom laughed along, slapping him playfully on the arm. I felt my cheeks burning up. This was too much, even for me. But before I could come up with anything to say, Beatrice grabbed the skillet from the stove. "Don't waste our time with this garbage," she hurled the contents of the skillet into the trash can. The room fell silent except for the hiss of leftover heat on the empty pan. I stood there, frozen, trying to wrap my head around the fact that the meal I had spent the last hour preparing was now mixed in with coffee grounds and eggshells. My effort to please, to do something different, felt foolish now. I looked at the trash, and I could feel every cruel word and snide remark they ever threw at me sticking to my skin. I couldn't even be mad anymore, it felt pointless. I started to clean up, my movements automatic. The kitchen felt colder now. I knew I should be angry, I should scream or cry or something to show them this wasn't okay. But instead, I just moved quietly, picking up the pieces of my failed attempt at dinner, at trying something, anything, to make this life I was living feel like it had a bit of me in it. The day had heated up more than the forecast said. It was Beatrice's birthday, and against my better judgment, I had gone and got her something special. Wrapped the gift myself, this mirror from Morocco, all hand-painted tiles and real craftsmanship. I thought she might appreciate something unique, something not from the department store clearance shelf. So what did you get her? Mark eyed me as he sprawled over the couch like some lazy cat. Something nice? I said, my hands tweaking the bow on the package, trying to smooth down my rising nerves. He chuckled. You're nice, and her nice ain't the same, Kira. We were in the dining room, this shrine to dark wood and silence, waiting for the queen herself to show up. I heard her before I saw her, that voice curdling the air. Mark, what's the hold-up? There's cake waiting. She swept in, her gaze fell on the gift, and she frowned. What's that? I handed over the package with a hopeful smile. Happy birthday, Beatrice. She looked at me like I was offering a dead rat. But she took it, shredded the paper, and held up the mirror. What in the world is this? I felt Mark's stare burning into my scalp. It's a mirror, handmade from Morocco. I thought it was beautiful, unique. Unique? She squawked, her face scrunching up. It's hideous. And before I could even blink, she slammed the thing onto the floor. Shattered glass skittered across the tiles like wicked ice. Mark didn't even flinch. Kira, what were you thinking? His voice was sharp enough to cut. I stared at the broken mirror, feeling something inside me splinter along with it. I'm sorry, I thought. She cut me off with a wave of her hand, turned to Mark. Tell your wife to stick to cash. Can't go wrong with money. I felt the shards of my patience giving away under my feet. I went to my purse, pulled out an envelope, last-minute insurance I knew I might need, and handed her 5 crisp $100 bills. Here, I said, trying to hide the trembling in my words. She snatched the cash hungrily. Well, that's more like it. Mark walked over, swept a piece of broken mirror with his shoe, looking at me like I was the mess he had to clean up. Next time, just ask me what to get her, he snapped. I dumped the shards into the bin, listening to them tinkle like a chandelier in a quake. A quieter, angrier part of me wished I could tell her exactly where she could stick her money, but instead, I quietly wrapped her cake slices, got through the day without another word. As the hours lurched by, the house filled with the laughter and chitter of guests, all of them ignoring the tense undercurrent that was me and them. I handed out drinks, laughed when expected, and played the part of the devoted wife and daughter-in-law. That evening I sat on the edge of the bathtub, staring at my reflection in the smaller, unbroken mirror there. If only I could buy something to fix what was broken inside, I thought. The silent room seemed to agree, and for a long time, it was the most understanding company I had. The wheels of my suitcase dragged a rhythmic clunking over the joints in the sidewalk as I walked up to my front door. I'd just gotten back from Greece. I was there for a shoot, for weeks of filming and a slice of freedom that I didn't know I was starving for until I tasted it. My keys seemed to jangle extra loud as I fitted them into the lock and swung the door open. What hit me wasn't the smell of the house or the stack of unopened mail. It was Beatrice, planted in the middle of the living room, bags piled at her feet like she'd just claimed a spot on the subway. I'm moving in, she declared, her voice brooking no argument. I felt my exhaustion evaporate into a tight ball of anxiety in my chest. What? Why? She eyed me like I was being thick on purpose. Rent's killing me, and since you're never around, it makes sense. I'll take the guest room. This was the worst kind of surprise, the kind that didn't bring any joy, just a heavy weight. I looked to Mark, seeking an ally, but his face was set in stone. Yeah, Kira, why the hell not? Makes sense to me, Mark said. I heard in his voice the finality of a door slamming shut. But, Mark, He cut me off with a sharp wave of his hand. Don't start. You've been freeloading off my space for years. The word stung, like rubbing alcohol on a fresh cut. That's when my hand dove into my bag, rummaging past the trinkets and memories of Greece until my fingers wrapped around the envelope, the one I kept tucked away for moments impossible to predict. I slapped the divorce papers on the coffee table between us. They seemed to hover for a second before landing, a soft sweep in the tense air. I want a divorce. For a moment, Mark just stared, and the only sound was Beatrice's slow inhale as if she was about to dive underwater. He picked up the papers, and I braced myself for yelling, for pleading, anything. But without saying a word, he scrawled his name across the bottom and tossed them back at me like they were a takeout menu he didn't want. Beatrice, her eyes gleaming like when she found $50 in a coat pocket, actually clapped. It's about time. I looked between the two of them, this pair that was supposed to be my family, and I felt nothing but the need to fill up my lungs. I didn't belong here, maybe I never did. With one last look at the shell of what used to be my life, I grabbed my suitcase. Where you going, Kira? Mark's voice was a dull blade, not cutting enough to hurt anymore. Anywhere but here. My voice came out steadier than I felt. There were no goodbyes, just the click of the door behind me, a soft punctuation mark on the end of a very long, very tiring sentence. It's strange how life can do a 180 when you're least expecting it. A few months since the divorce and life settled into a new kind of normal. My apartment might have been smaller than the house, but it was mine. I was in the middle of a tea brewing ritual that had become my new little evening piece when there was a knock at the door. I opened the door, and there they were, Mark and Beatrice. Like they'd just been out for a walk and decided to stop by. We saw your TV show, Mark said, shoving his hands into his pockets, a sheepish grin smeared across his face like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Beatrice just stood there, a forced smile stretching her lips tight. Yeah? I said, nursing my mug, not stepping aside to let them in. You watching TV together now? You're doing well, huh? Beatrice chimed in, peering over Mark's shoulder to get a look inside the apartment. I leaned against the door frame, taking a slow sip, feeling the heat of the tea and the situation. I suppose, I replied, the edge of a laugh bubbling beneath the surface. It wasn't just small talk they were after, I could smell it. These two never came without an agenda. Beatrice looked desperate, fidgeting with her purse strap, and Mark looked like he was about to try selling me a used car that was 2 steps away from the junkyard. They tried to butter me up with compliments, nodding at my tiny living room as if it was a palace, but I wasn't biting. Their tune changed rapidly when the buttering didn't work. Look, Kira. Mark's gaze darted around, avoiding mine. Things ain't been so great since you left. Financially, I mean. I raised an eyebrow. Is that right? And it's not just about money, Beatrice piped up. It's lonely. We miss you. I couldn't help it then, I laughed. It was dry and had the edge of years of bottled up frustrations behind it. You miss me? Well, that's a neat trick. Mark's face flushed a shade of guilt so vivid I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. We just thought, maybe we could start over. I leaned closer, making sure they could see the lack of sympathy in my eyes. You thought wrong. I've moved on, and this? I paused, gesturing to the space between us with my mug. This is me being happy, without the drama, without the mess. You two were the best bad decision I ever walked away from. Beatrice's mouth snapped shut, her face folding into a scowl. Mark just stood there like I'd slapped him across the face. They didn't say anything more, they didn't have to. As they turned away, their shoulders slumped, the door closed with a soft click and I was alone again, my heart pounding a victory march. I turned, pressing my back against the door, sliding down till I was sitting with the mug held loosely in my grip, my laughter ringing out, clear and loud in the empty apartment. Turning the tables never felt so good. My life's totally flipped since the show took off. People can't seem to get enough of me eating my way through the most out-of-way places and bringing back killer recipes. I guess it's true what they say, everyone loves a good comeback story, and mine's being served up nice and spicy. As I sat scrolling through my socials, watching the follower count tick up like it's got somewhere to be, my doorbell rings. Who could that be? I haven't ordered takeout. Lo and behold, there they were again, Mark dragging his feet and Beatrice trying to straighten out her scowl like she's walking into church. Kira, you gotta listen. Mark gets down on his knees right in my hallway like he's about to propose again, which is funny in a sad sort of way. I'll do anything. I'll even clean the house, cook your meals. I crossed my arms, trying not to let my smirk show. Really? You cooking? That'd be the day. And Beatrice, oh, she's got this look like she just ate something sour. Kira, the show's great and all, but family's family. I let out a little chuckle. Oh, I know about family all right. And mine just got a whole lot bigger, a couple million online. They blinked at me, not quite getting it, so I spelled it out. My followers, Mark. They're my family now. And they seem to appreciate me a whole lot more. Beatrice piped up again, with her hands fidgeting like she's trying to pull words out of the air. Kira, we just didn't realize. I cut her off with a little wave of my hand. Save it. I've heard enough. Did I ever tell you about that mirror from Morocco, Beatrice, the one I gave you for your birthday? They both looked at me, puzzled, like two kids who can't remember if they fed the dog. You broke it, threw it on the floor, I reminded her. Beatrice's face fell. Oh, that old thing? I nodded, casual-like. Worth thousands, that old thing. But you wouldn't know value if it bit you in the butt. I swear, you could almost see the cogs turning in their heads as they put two and two together, finally understanding the score. Mark found his feet again, stammering, but we didn't know. Kira, please. I raised a hand to stop him. I've always had money, even when you thought I was down and out. And now, my little TV venture's making sure I've got more than I know what to do with. Mark looked like he was about to pass out, and Beatrice, she was muttering under her breath, something about not knowing. I walked to the door, opened it wide, and stood there. Here's how it's going to be. You two will turn around, walk out of my life, and never come back. I don't need your drama, I've got my own show for that. They didn't move, just stood there gobsmacked. So, I made it real simple for them. Out. Now. And don't bother me again. I got recipes to try and places to see, and none of them include you. Shutting the door behind them, I felt the weight of the world lift off my shoulders. I went back to my kitchen, to my little empire of spices and sauces, to the future I was cooking up one dish at a time. I wasn't really mad, just done. Done with their begging, done with their games, done with anything that didn't smell like success. Or my next big meal. It felt good. No, it felt great. I glanced at my phone again, another 100 followers since I last checked. Yeah, I think I'll be alright. No need to look back when the future's this flavorful. Hi, I'm Lily Donovan, and this is my story or whatever. My family's been a bit of a mess since forever. Got a sister, Ellie, who's sort of like the crown jewel at home because of her bad heart. Our mom, yeah, she's fixated on Ellie. With Ellie being born sickly, she got extra eyes on her, extra care. Mom was always shadowing her, making sure she was breathing okay, eating right, or was warm enough. Almost like I'm part of the furniture. Anyway, Dad was different. He was my champ. When I needed something, he was my go-to. He'd listen, not just nod along, but actually listen. Ellie, though, she got all the attention without even trying, and the drama, tons of it. Take one morning at the breakfast table for example. I was on my second cup of coffee, flipping through some job listings. Dad was at the other end, eyeing the sports section like it had the meaning of life tucked in there. Then in breezes Ellie, all theatrics, like she's about to drop some Shakespearean tragedy on us. "So, the doc says my heart's acting up again," Ellie says, all breathless and expecting a scene. Mom's up from her seat like someone lit a fire under her, asking, "What does that mean, hon? You feeling okay? You need anything?" Ellie, "Nah, I'm fine. But the vacation's off. Doctor's orders." Dad stops looking at his paper and goes, "That's rough, kiddo." Me, I'm just silent. Because what's there to say? Every little thing about Ellie's sickness tosses our family into chaos. But before I can even shrug, Mom's looking at me with those eyes. You know the type, like I've suddenly kicked a puppy by being quiet. And out of nowhere, I decide to toss in my 2 cents. Maybe it's not the end of the world, right? Mom almost jumps at me. "Lily, can't you see your sister's struggling?" Ellie just slurps her juice, watching the show. I shrug. Just saying. There's worse stuff out there, ain't there? Ellie puts her glass down and says, "Nice, sis. Real supportive." Dad finally puts down the paper like he's about to referee a boxing match. "Ease up on your sister, Ellie." But Mom ain't having it. She can at least act like she cares. I push back from the table. This is the same old song and dance. I tell them straight. Look, Ellie plays sick and we all gotta dance. I'm sick of it. Literally. Ellie's eyes go all wide like she can't believe I'd say that, but come on, it's been the story of my life. Dad gets that I'm fed up, and tries to smooth things over. Let's all just calm down. But I've already grabbed my jacket. Walking out, I toss over my shoulder. I'll be back when the drama's done. You can bet they had a lot to say after I left, but honestly, for once, it was nice not to hear it. Dad understood, Mom was pissed, and Ellie, well, Ellie was Ellie. That's family for you. My sights were set on college. It was my out. It wasn't just about getting away, it was about getting somewhere. Grades had been my weapon of choice, and I wielded them well. I scored a ticket to a good school, a scholarship to boot. Ellie, despite everything, made it to college too, though it was clear her path there was marked by a different set of expectations. She was out to prove something, but I still wasn't quite sure what. "You gotta aim high, Lil," Dad said once as we cleared plates, his hand landing heavy and sure on my shoulder. "Don't let anyone dim your lights, hear me?" "Yeah, Dad. I hear ya." I smiled, tucking those words close. It was the quiet fuel I needed. To soar. To escape. To be more than just Lily Donovan, sister to the kid with the weak heart, daughter to a mother with uneven scales. College was a different world. I had my nose in the books, pushing hard to make something of myself. Ellie, she just couldn't hack it. She was lost, floundering in seminars and lectures, like she was trying to read a map with no legend. She dropped the news on me like a bomb, the tinny voice from my cell speaker signaling surrender. "College ain't my jam, Lily," Ellie said, her words lackluster. "I'm dropping out." I balanced the phone between my ear and shoulder, multitasking between the call and my constitutional law textbook. "You're bailing? Just like that? Got better things lined up than being a brain like you," she snapped back. There was a heavy dose of her trademark venom in her voice. The same one that could turn from sweetie to serpent in a single sentence. "So, what? You're skipping off into the sunset with the first guy who bats an eye?" I snorted. "Exactly," she hissed. "Someone's gotta live a little while you bury yourself in those dusty books. Wouldn't want to die alone with cats as my only company." I squeezed the bridge of my nose. Ellie could never resist a jab. Next thing I knew, I was sitting in the back of a dimly lit church, law book hidden in my lap, as Ellie strutted down the aisle. She had nabbed herself a husband before she'd even figured out who she was. It was like she was playing life's game without bothering to learn the rules. After the I do's, she swanned over with her glass raised, smirking like she'd won some sort of race. Cheers to me, the married woman, and to you, Lily, maybe you'll graduate to cat lady soon? She snickered, cruelty wrapped in a toast. I bit back the anger, knowing Ellie relished any sign of getting under my skin. Maybe, but at least I'll have a law degree to hang on the wall. Cats or not. Her eyes narrowed. You think you're better than me, with your big dreams of being a hotshot lawyer? As she flittered away to go cut the cake, a part of me wanted to scream. I wanted to shake some sense into her. But I stayed in my seat, the anger simmering. Back on campus, I poured myself more into my studies. The late nights were my fortress from Ellie's barbed comments. Every essay, every exam was another brick in my walls, fortifying my future against her cynicism. Ellie and I were on divergent paths, she, reveling in the now with a sharp tongue, and I, building a foundation for tomorrow with gritted teeth. That was just the way of it. You can't pick your family. But you sure as hell can pick which of their words to listen to. And Ellie's? I was learning to let them go like seeds in the wind, insignificant and unworthy of taking root. Turning 30 hit different. The job at Uncle John's law firm was steady. Every day in court was like a chess game. I'd become good at it, keeping my cool under those fluorescent lights. Mark and I had been an item since who knows when. We figured, why not make it official? So we planned to. Dad's been gone a while now. I don't bring it up much. Stuff happened, he's not here, we move on. That means I've kind of been both the rock and the hard place for myself. When I said to Mom and Ellie, hey, I'm marrying Mark in a bit, they just shrugged. That's nice, Mom said without looking up from her cards. Ellie? She couldn't even pause her TV show. I heard her mumble a congrats, buried under a heap of reality show noise and screams of her children. Where is her husband Dave? He was almost never at home. Living with Uncle John's sometimes biting sense of legal wisdom wasn't much different. I'd tell him about the upcoming wedding and he'd just grunt. You sure about the prenup? Romance isn't exactly our family style. So here I am, 2 weeks out, and it's all about the bare minimum. I want a quiet do. Some folks would take Mom and Sis ignoring the whole deal like a punch. I take it like a typical Tuesday. No help? No problem. It's just Mark and me, and that's plenty. I draft my own contracts by day, iron out merge clauses, and at night, I scroll through potential honeymoon spots on my phone. No fluff, just picking a place to unwind. After the case I just cracked, I need it. Weddings bring out strange in folks, I guess. Mom suddenly caught up with her bridge club, acting like playing cards is her full-time job. I dropped by to give her an update on the no-fuss dress I picked, not that she asked. She barely glances up, don't stress. It'll be fine. Full house. I should have knocked. Cool, Mom, I say, but I'm talking to the wall, because she's dealing cards again. Ellie's the same. She calls, and it's one crisis after another. I can't find a dress, she complains over the phone. Ellie, just wear something from your closet. She huffs like I've suggested hiking the Everest in flip-flops. Fine, she snaps. I go about my days, bits and pieces of the wedding falling together between deposition prep and client consultations. Mark's doing his share, but mostly he's just keeping me sane. Always a joke ready to diffuse my stress like a bomb squad pro. I handle the indifferences from Mom and Ellie the same way I manage everything else, with a little nod and a lot of getting on with it. It's like being in the eye of my own personal hurricane, watching all the whirlwinds, but not really feeling them. I've gotten good at it, too good maybe. In the end, it's simple. I'm not walking down the aisle to make a statement. It isn't a parade or a show. It's just signing papers, making things official, a modest gather-up for a lifetime of more down-to-earth moments with Mark. He's the I do at the end of my very practical, very organized checklist. As for Mom and Ellie, well, they'll show up or they won't. The wedding will happen, and then life will roll on. It always does. I was mid-sentence with a contractor, haggling over the price of folding chairs, when Mom's call threw everything off balance. Her voice, usually as steady as a metronome, was all over the place, like a needle jumping grooves on a record. "Honey, Ellie's been left by her husband, with 2 kids," she said, and I could almost picture her hand fluttering to her chest, the way she does when the latest gossip hits. I was so stunned I almost dropped the phone. "What? You're joking." "No, dear. I wish I were. She's a mess. We're all in shock. It's just, would you consider postponing?" I bristled at the notion, felt that stubborn streak flare up. "Postpone? Mom, I've got a timetable tighter than a drum here. You know that." "But Ellie is going to have to deal with her own mess," I cut in, with an edge that said the discussion was closed. But Mom wasn't done. "She needs us, needs family. Maybe it's not a good time for a wedding?" I scoffed. "And when is it ever a good time, huh? Look, I'm sorry for Ellie, but life doesn't stop. Mine doesn't, at least." I turned to Mark, who had witnessed the tail end of the call, his eyebrows doing a high-wire act. "What now?" he asked, towing the line between concern and asking for the mess report. "Ellie's husband ditched her. Mom wants us to push back the wedding." His eyes widened slightly. "Wow. Are we?" I shook my head. "No way. We've bent over backward for this family enough." He nodded, his hand finding my shoulder, a silent signal of support. "All right. But you okay with that?" I took a deep breath, somewhere between frustration and determination. "Hell yes. It's our turn, Mark. We've done the waiting, the pleasing. Remember?" "I remember," he said, that low voice steady as ever. "It's just family is." I raised a hand. "Don't say complicated. It's overrated." Mark chuckled, a low rumble in his chest. "All right, tough cookie. You call the shots." A mix of guilt and relief swirled in me, but I pushed it down. I had enough on my plate without adding second helpings of pity for Ellie. Life ensued. I went back to ticking off checkboxes, ignoring the clawing feeling that comes with not being the good guy. Or in this case, the good sister. The day didn't start off great, and I could tell it was only destined to nosedive from there. Mark was trying to steer clear of any drama, but somehow, we wound up accepting the dinner invite at Mom's place. "Just a family get-together," she'd said. But I knew better. As soon as we walked in, the air was heavy, kinda like walking into a wall. Mom had this stern look plastered on her face, and Ellie, my sister, she was already a few glasses in, eyes red and puffy like she's been crying or something. I barely got my coat off before Ellie slurred out, "Lily, you gotta understand." Her voice wobbled like one of those wacky inflatable arm guys outside a car dealership. "I'm going through hell, and there you are parading your happiness around." She clutched at her heart out of habit. "But we all know that she is absolutely healthy now, her childhood illness has sunk into oblivion." Stiffening up, I shot back, "Ellie, it's not like that, and you know it. Stop playing the victim." Mark put a hand on my shoulder, urging me to ease up, but I was past fed up. Mom chimed in then, voice cold as ice. "Lily, we're just asking for a little compassion. Is that too much?" I could feel the temperature drop with her every word. Still, Mark and I, we were a united front. "We've planned this for a year," Mark said, his firmness a surprise even to me. "It's not just Lily's call, it's mine too, and we're not postponing." Mom gave us a hard look, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Ungrateful," she hissed at me. "After all we've done for you." I snorted, narrowed my eyes. "Ungrateful? Really? For what, exactly?" That's when Mom dropped the real bomb, her voice a mix of fury and something that sounded like a twisted form of caring. "If you can't cancel your wedding, then at least skip your honeymoon." Stay and watch your nieces and nephews. Give your sister a break to travel, let her heal. Mark snorted, disbelief coloring his chuckle. Are you serious right now? We're supposed to give up our honeymoon for Ellie's getaway? Ellie stood up, swaying a little as she leaned across the table with a sneer. Yeah, 'cause why should you be happy if I'm not? I stood up too, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. Enough, Ellie. Life doesn't stop for you. I'm getting married, and I'm going on my honeymoon. End of discussion. Mom stared at us, eyes flinty. If you walk out that door, Lily, don't bother coming back. And if I stay, what? I get guilt-tripped and walked over my entire life? I snapped, already heading for the door. Mark was right behind me. Neither of us looked back, even as the door slammed shut with a sound that said more clearly than any words could, the line was drawn. It was us against them, and I was done playing by their crazy rules. I was knee-deep in Tool and Good Wishes when Uncle John's number lit up my phone. Ain't this the time when you're supposed to be getting pampered or something? Was his gruff opener when I answered. Yeah, well, you know how it goes. I replied, half laughing, despite the frustrations nipping at my heels. You got a minute? He asked. His voice had that no-nonsense edge to it that I remembered from when I was a kid. Sure, lay it on me, I said, stepping out onto the venue's balcony for some privacy. It's about your mom's latest request, Uncle John started, and I braced myself. Listen, kiddo, she tried to strong-arm me to cancel your vacation. No vacation, no honeymoon, says it's what family does, supports each other and all that jazz. I felt my hands clench around the phone. Is that right? I managed to say, trying to keep the ice out of my voice. Yeah, but don't worry, I told her where to shove it, Uncle John replied, and I could almost hear him spitting the words out. Uncle Jay, you didn't have to get involved, I said, the gratitude and stress mixing up inside me. I'll fight your corner any day. This is your time. You and Mark deserve to enjoy all of it, without any crap thrown your way. I just can't believe she's trying to ruin my wedding and break my honeymoon, I said, rubbing my temple. Stubborn as a mule, that sister of mine, he chuckled, but it was that kind of laugh that didn't reach the eyes. Anyway, I've got your back. You two just focus on tying the knot and then getting naughty on your own time, if you catch my drift. I laughed, a real laugh this time. Couldn't have said it better myself, Uncle. Course you couldn't. I'm the family wordsmith, he said, his voice proud as a peacock. Then he lowered it a notch. Remember, kiddo, you're doing nothing wrong. Go, get married, be happy. I promised I would and hung up, feeling a notch lighter, but with the weight of the whole situation still sitting on my chest like an unwelcome cat. The rehearsal dinner was buzzing when I got back. Mark caught my eye across the room and frowned when he saw my face. Everything okay? He mouthed. I nodded and made my way through a sea of relatives and friends, plastering on a smile like it was lipstick. Mark met me halfway, his hands finding mine, his eyes searching my face. You're worrying me, he said. It was Uncle John. Mom's trying to recruit him into her Save the Date but Screw the Honeymoon campaign. I sighed, feeling the whole thing splayed out again. He snorted. She's relentless. Like a dog with a bone, I agreed. But Uncle John's not biting. I swear, he's the only one actually standing up for us. Well, we've got each other. That's the main thing, Mark replied, and wrapped me in a hug that felt like armor against the world's crazy. The murmur of family and friends bubbled around us, all unsuspecting of the undercurrents they were swimming in. The table settings gleamed, glasses clinked, and laughter soared like fireflies in the evening light. As I lay down that night, with the stars wearing their best shine outside my window, I could only hope that our next chapter would be written on the bright side of this often too-shadowed world. Mark's steady breathing in the dark was a promise and question all at once. It didn't matter what came next. His yes matched my yes, and that felt like the only answer we'd ever need. After what they tried to pull off, Mom and my sister said they wouldn't be caught dead at my wedding. They made sure everyone knew it too, telling anyone who'd listen that I was just a cold piece of work. They didn't stop there, though. They started spreading all sorts of nonsense around town about me, but you know what? It didn't matter one bit. The big day came, and it was nothing short of awesome. Our family and friends filled the place up. There were so many of them. Aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone was there, laughing and joking around. It was loud, and it was fun, and nobody brought up Mom and Sis. It was like we all agreed not to let them ruin the vibe. My bridesmaids were a whirlwind of activity. Girl, are those butterflies in your stomach? Or just the 2 bottles of champagne we guzzled? Lisa, always the joker, nudged me with her elbow as she adjusted my veil for the 100th time. Just excitement, I guess, I replied, my smile as wide as the horizon. Well, you look banging, Jen chimed in, her hands making tiny adjustments to my bouquet. Mark's gonna fall over when he sees you. The ceremony space was filled with the tunes of a string quartet digging into my favorite classics, nothing fancy, just raw music that filled the soul. Damn, can you believe you're about to get hitched? Lisa sighed, her tough tone softened a touch by the moment. Believe it? I planned it, down to the last petal. I laughed as I peeked through the crack of the door at the guests filtering in. The ceremony was a blur of words and emotions. When it came time to exchange vows, Mark's voice filled the room. I promised to keep it real, to be your partner in crime, to have your back, and make you laugh when life sucks. I took a deep breath, my hands shaking just a little. I promised to always be honest, to support your crazy schemes, to love you even when you leave your socks on the floor. The room erupted into laughter and cheers, the love tangible in the air like the warmth of the spring sun coming through the windows. As husband and wife, you may now kiss the bride, the officiant announced, and Mark wasted no time. It was the kind of kiss that said we were in this for the long haul, for better, for worse, and hell, even for the mundane. Later, as the party wound down, Uncle John found me, his face a little shiny from the festivities. You did good, kid. And if anyone gives you trouble, you send them my way. I will, Uncle Jay, thanks for everything, I said, meaning every word. As the night drew to a close, and the last stragglers left, Mark and I stood hand in hand, taking in the moment. Ready to start this adventure? He asked, squeezing my hand. I've never been more ready for anything in my life, I replied, and we stepped out into the cool night air. We climbed into the car, cans clattering behind us, a playful, just married sign taped to the back. I looked over at Mark, his face illuminated by the streetlights as we drove away. This is it, he said, his hand finding mine. This is us, I said, feeling the truth of it settle in my bones. My new hubby and I took off to this cozy beach spot for our honeymoon. Just us, the sun, and the sea. It was like a week-long chill pill. And nope, I did not call Mom or Sis. Not once. And I didn't miss them either. Yeah, family's supposed to be your rock, right? But sometimes, you gotta build your own foundation. That's what I did, and it's solid. I don't need that kind of crazy in my life, and I'm not about to invite it back in. Jane, you seriously need a break from all these dusty books. It's Clara's birthday bash tonight. You gotta join us. Liz practically commanded, her voice laced with that mix of concern and exasperation she reserved just for me. I'm Jane, a 34-year-old English literature professor, more comfortable dissecting Shakespeare's sonnets than navigating social gatherings. Fine, Liz. But if it's a snooze fest, I'm holding you responsible, I replied, marking my place in Hamlet with a sigh. That evening, Clara's party was in full swing, a whirl of laughter and clinking glasses. That's where I met Alex. He was the finance guy, his world of stocks and assets as distant from my literary haven as could be. Yet, something clicked, a spark neither of us could deny. Shakespeare, huh? That's pretty highbrow. I'm more about the Wall Street Journal than the Globe Theatre, Alex joked, his smile infectious. I chuckled, the warmth in his eyes softening my usual reserve. Well, perhaps I can show you that literature has its own charms. Might even teach you a thing or two about the human condition, I quipped, finding myself surprisingly at ease. The conversation didn't skip a beat, flowing as smoothly as the evening breeze. Soon, our casual meets turned into late-night talks, and before we knew it, we were inseparable. The idea of us seemed as natural as the turning of pages in one of my books. Meeting Alex's mother, Elaine, was like stepping into a scene from a novel. She exuded warmth and elegance, her demeanor as inviting as the home she welcomed me into. Jane, dear, it's so wonderful to finally meet you. Alex hasn't stopped talking about you. I feel like I know you already, Elaine greeted me, her voice a soothing melody. It's an absolute pleasure to meet you too, Elaine. Alex speaks so highly of you, I responded, genuinely touched by her kindness. The day Alex came to visit my family home was a chapter on its own. The awe in his eyes was unmistakable as he took in the sprawling estate, the tangible proof of my father's success. Your family's place is something else, Jane. Your dad must have a Midas touch with investments, Alex remarked, his voice a mix of admiration and something else I couldn't quite place. He's done well for himself, indeed. The stock exchange has been kind to him, I replied, my pride in my family's achievements shining through. My parents embraced Alex with open arms, his charm and apparent adoration for me sealing his place in their hearts. The stage was set, our roles as the perfect couple cemented. The wedding was a dream, a celebration of love and promises of a shared future. The days following our wedding were supposed to be the happiest of my life. Instead, they turned into a relentless storm of heartache and dread. Dad, the strongest man I knew, was suddenly confined to a hospital bed, his strength waning under the cruel grip of cancer. The hospital's sterile, white walls became our grim reality, the beeping of machines a constant, unwelcome soundtrack. One bleak evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the hospital room, Dad called me over with a feeble gesture. His eyes, once so full of life, now mirrored the fatigue and pain he was enduring. Jane, my darling, he began, his voice barely above a whisper, I need you to be strong. I've made arrangements for you, for after I'm gone. There's an inheritance, $2 million. It's yours, my dear. I want you to have a secure future. I gripped his hand, the cold reality of his words piercing my heart. Dad, please, don't talk like that. You're going to get through this. But before I could absorb the gravity of his revelation, Alex, who had been lingering by the door, stepped forward, his reaction sending a chill down my spine. $2 million, sir? That's quite a fortune. I mean, Jane, we need to think about how to manage this blessing, he said, his tone unsettlingly eager, his gaze not meeting mine. The days turned into an agonizing cycle of hospital visits and silent, tension-filled nights at home. Alex's demeanor had shifted, the man I had fallen in love with seemed consumed by thoughts of the inheritance, his warmth replaced by a cold, calculating distance. One night, as we sat in the dim glow of our living room, the silence between us thick and suffocating, Alex broke the stillness, his words like a cold gust in an already frigid room. Jane, we need to talk about the future, about the inheritance. Think about it, we could really turn our lives around. A luxury home, maybe travel the world. It's time to start planning, don't you think? He urged, his eyes not quite meeting mine. I stared at him, disbelief and anger swirling within me. Planning? My dad is lying in a hospital bed, fighting for his life, and you're here making plans for a future splurge? Is that all you care about, Alex? The money? He recoiled, as if my words were physical blows. No, Jane, you've got it all wrong. I'm just trying to look out for us, for our future. I didn't mean to. But his words rang hollow, the apology a feeble attempt to mask the naked greed that had seeped into his voice. In that moment, a painful truth began to dawn on me. The man I had vowed to spend my life with was a stranger, his thoughts not on the profound loss we were about to face, but on the financial gain it would bring. Life after Dad's diagnosis was like walking through a never-ending fog. My home, once a place of laughter and warmth, felt cold, the air thick with unsaid words and hidden agendas. Elaine, Alex's mom, came into our lives like she was the cavalry, ready to save the day. But her eyes, sharp and calculating, told a different story. "Jane, honey, you're worn to a thread," Elaine said one evening, her voice smooth but with an edge that made me uneasy. "Let me help around here. You shouldn't carry all this alone." I was too tired, too beaten down by the relentless waves of worry, to argue. "Thanks, Elaine. I appreciate it, I really do," I replied, trying to muster a smile. But the real storm was still brewing, quietly, sneakily. That night, Elaine came to my room with a small bottle in her hand. "Jane, you look like you could use some real rest. These will help you sleep. Trust me," she said, pushing the bottle of pills towards me. Something in her insistence set off alarm bells in my mind, but the promise of a few hours free from my racing thoughts was too tempting. "All right, I'll give them a try." "Thanks, Elaine," I said, though a part of me was screaming to throw the pills away. No sooner had she left than whispers from the living room reached my ears, a low murmur of conspiracy that pulled me out of my bed and towards the door. I cracked it open, the sliver of light from the living room casting long shadows on the floor. Alex's voice, usually so warm and loving, was cold, almost cruel. "She's out like a light, Mom. Those pills knock her right out. We can talk business now," he said, a hint of glee in his tone that turned my blood to ice. Elaine's reply was a quiet, venomous chuckle. "Perfect. Now, about that inheritance. Half of it is legally yours, you know. We're talking about a serious cash injection." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. These were the people who were supposed to be my family, my support. Instead, they were plotting like villains in one of the tragedies I taught in class. Alex's next words were a punch to the gut. "Half? That's kids' play, Mom. I want the whole pie. We need to figure out how to get Jane to sign it all over. Once I have the cash, I can cut her loose." I stood there, my hand on the doorknob, feeling like the floor had just dropped away from under me. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a full-blown conspiracy, a plan to rob me of my inheritance, my dignity, my life as I knew it. The morning sun did little to brighten the heavy atmosphere in the house after I uncovered Alex and Elaine's despicable scheme. Sitting at the kitchen table, the untouched coffee in front of me turned cold, a stark reminder of the chilling conversation I had overheard. The betrayal felt like a gaping wound, and I was at a loss, unsure how to navigate this treacherous storm. Mom entered the kitchen, her steps firm, her presence always a beacon of strength in our home. She noticed my distress immediately, her perceptive eyes missing nothing. "Jane, what's wrong? You're as pale as a ghost. Talk to me," she urged, her voice a blend of concern and command. I hesitated, the weight of betrayal heavy on my tongue. But seeing the unwavering support in her eyes, I found the courage to confess. "Mom, it's Alex and Elaine. I overheard them last night. They're plotting, scheming to take Dad's inheritance, and then, they plan to leave me with nothing." The kitchen fell silent, the air thick with tension. Mom's face remained stoic, but her eyes were sharp, a storm brewing in their depths. "Is that so?" she said calmly, her voice betraying no hint of the rage I knew she must be feeling. "Well, they've picked the wrong family to mess with. We're not pawns in their little game, Jane. We're the ones who'll be calling checkmate." Her words were like a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge of despair. "But how, Mom? They've got everything planned out. It's like they've been setting this trap for a long time," I replied, the enormity of the situation threatening to overwhelm me. Mom's smile was thin but determined. "Planning is one thing, executing is another. They think they're clever, but they're not the only ones who can play this game. We need to be strategic, think 2 steps ahead. The kitchen became our war room, the table of battleground where strategies were formed and tactics were laid out. First, we need to secure your assets, make sure they can't get their hands on what's rightfully yours, Mom said, her mind racing through the legal labyrinths. But Mom, the inheritance is huge, and it's all in my name. How can we protect it from them? I asked, the problem seeming insurmountable. She gave me a look that was both fierce and reassuring. We'll consult with the best lawyers, set up trusts, do whatever it takes. Your father didn't work his whole life for his legacy to fall into the hands of vultures. As the plan took shape, I felt a spark of hope ignite within me. Mom, you're incredible. I don't know what I'd do without you. Her hand reached across the table, gripping mine with a strength that bolstered my resolve. You're your father's daughter, Jane, strong and smart. You'll never have to face anything alone. Now, let's put our plan into action and show those snakes they've bitten off more than they can chew. The day of the will reading was like the calm before the storm. The notary's office was stark and formal, a stark contrast to the turmoil churning in my heart. Alex and Elaine were there, their faces poorly masked with faux solemnity, but their eyes, hungry and calculating, betrayed their true intentions. The notary, a stern-faced man with a no-nonsense air, cleared his throat, breaking the tense silence. We are gathered here to read the last will and testament of Mr. James Harrington. As per his wishes, the contents of the will are to be disclosed in the presence of his immediate family. Alex leaned in, a wolfish grin barely concealed. This is it, Jane. Our new beginning, he whispered, his breath cold against my ear. I stiffened, repulsed by his proximity and the implication of his words. Before I could respond, the notary began to speak, his voice formal and detached. Mr. Harrington bequeathed the sum of $2 million to his daughter, Jane Harper. A gasp escaped Elaine, her facade crumbling for a moment to reveal the greed that lay beneath. Alex's hand twitched, a visceral reaction to the mention of the money. He was about to congratulate me, no doubt seeing dollar signs, when the notary continued. However, it is also stated here that Mr. Harrington incurred debts amounting to $2.5 million. The room went cold. Alex's face drained of color, his earlier excitement replaced by shock and disbelief. Elaine's mouth opened and closed, a fish out of water, her plans unraveling before her eyes. This can't be right, Alex stammered, his composure shattered. There must be some mistake. The notary, unfazed, pushed forward a stack of documents. I assure you, everything is documented and legal. Mr. Harrington's assets and liabilities are now passed on to his next of kin. Elaine's eyes darted between the papers and my stoic face. But that means, half of the debt is Alex's responsibility too? Yes, ma'am. According to the law, marital assets and liabilities are shared, the notary confirmed, his voice devoid of sympathy. The revelation hit Alex and Elaine like a physical blow. Their dream of wealth had turned into a nightmare of debt. Elaine's earlier warmth vanished, her true nature, venomous and self-serving, coming to the forefront. We're not paying for this. It's her father's mess, Elaine hissed, her earlier facade of the doting mother-in-law gone. Alex, desperation creeping into his voice, turned to me. Jane, we need to sort this out. You can't let this happen. I looked at him, the man I once loved, now a stranger driven by greed and deceit. Sort this out? Alex, you made your intentions clear. You're not in this for me or for us. You're in this for the money. The room was thick with tension, the notary a silent observer to the drama unfolding before him. In that moment, the storm broke, the veil lifted, revealing the true colors of the people I had once called family. But as I stood there, facing the betrayal and the mountain of debt before me, I knew I wasn't alone. Mom's hand found mine, her grip firm and reassuring. We'll handle this, Jane. Together, she whispered, her voice a bastion of strength. Alex and Elaine, initially struck dumb by the revelation, quickly erupted into a whirlwind of fury and disbelief. "This is insane!" Alex bellowed, his face contorting with anger. "Are you seriously telling me this pile of papers is for real? Show them again, this can't be happening." The notary, a pillar of calm amidst the storm, methodically laid out the documents once more. Each line, each number, was a testament to a reality they couldn't escape. Elaine, her composure shattered, turned her venom towards me. "You knew, didn't you? You and your mother planned this. You're trying to drown us in your family's mess." That's when Mom stood up. Her presence filled the room, a quiet force amidst the chaos. "Enough," she said, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "My husband had his faults, his vices. The gambling, the debts, they were his burden. And now, according to the law, they are shared by Jane and Alex." Elaine's face was a mask of rage, her earlier facade of kindness nowhere to be seen. "We're not paying for someone else's mistakes. We won't let this happen." Cornered and desperate, Alex played his final, desperate card. "If that's how it's going to be, then fine. I want a divorce. And in that agreement, we'll make it crystal clear, neither of us gets anything from the other. No claims, no money, no property. Nothing." His words, meant to intimidate, only fueled my newfound resolve. "A divorce? That's the best idea you've had in a long time, Alex. Let's make it official. You walk away empty-handed. No ties, no debts, no nothing." The agreement was drafted with clinical precision, a clear, unambiguous document that severed the ties that once bound us. We signed it, each stroke of the pen marking the end of a chapter, the end of a farce disguised as a marriage. After signing the divorce papers, the heavy door of the notary's office closed behind us with a thud that felt final. The crisp air outside did little to clear the heaviness that hung over me. Alex and Elaine, their masks of pretense thoroughly discarded now, couldn't contain their contempt. "Well, Jane, looks like you're stuck with the short end of the stick. $500,000 in debt. That's quite a hole you're in," Alex sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. Elaine's laugh was cold, void of any warmth she once feigned. "You really thought you could outsmart us? Enjoy paying off your father's mess." Just then, Mom stepped forward, her demeanor calm but with an undercurrent of steel. "You two might want to hold off on your celebrations. You see, there's more to this story." Alex scoffed, his arrogance unshaken. "What could you possibly say to change anything now, Mrs. Harrington?" Mom's smile was enigmatic, a prelude to the revelation that was about to turn the tables. "Well, for starters, Jane's not alone in this. I'm here, and unlike what you've been led to believe, the real financial genius in this family has always been me." Elaine's smirk faltered, confusion clouding her features. Alex's expression mirrored his mother's, disbelief and curiosity warring on his face. "I've been the one managing the successful investments, the stock market ventures, not my late husband. My net worth? It's currently around $70 million. And yes, Jane is my sole heir." The impact of Mom's words hit Alex and Elaine like a physical blow, their smugness evaporating, replaced by shock and a dawning realization of the grave miscalculation they had made. Alex, the color draining from his face, stammered, "$70 million? But that means..." Mom's gaze was unwavering, her voice firm. "It means, Alex, that you and your mother have been chasing shadows while ignoring the real treasure. Jane's inheritance from me will secure her future. As for the debts left by her father, consider them settled. I won't have my daughter burdened by them." Elaine's mouth opened and closed, words failing her for the first time. Alex, his knees seemingly unable to support him, sank to the ground, his earlier bravado shattered. "Please, Jane, I didn't know. I was wrong. Forgive me," he pleaded, his voice barely a whisper, the mask of the cunning strategist gone, leaving only a desperate man in its wake. But it was too late for apologies, too late for regrets. I looked down at the man I once loved, now a stranger groveling at my feet. Forgiveness is earned, Alex, not begged for. You made your choice, and now you have to live with it. Turning my back on Alex and Elaine, Mom and I walked away, their pleas and protests fading into the background. The last laugh was indeed ours, but it wasn't one of triumph or joy. It was a laugh that acknowledged the end of a painful chapter and the beginning of a new, hopeful journey. The debt, the deceit, the heartbreak, they were all behind us now. Ahead lay a path of healing and rebuilding, with the strength and wisdom of a bond that no storm could break. The last laugh was a promise of brighter days, of a future where the shadows of the past no longer loomed over us. It was the laughter of freedom, of liberation from the chains of greed and betrayal. And as we stepped into the light of a new dawn, it was the laughter that heralded the beginning of a new chapter, written on our own terms, in our own time. The dust had settled, and the dawn of a new day brought clarity and a profound sense of peace. My life, once entangled with Alex and Elaine's deceit, was now my own. Yet, the echoes of their betrayal hadn't faded completely. Alex, in a last-ditch effort to salvage what he had lost, showed up on my doorstep, his eyes hollow, his stance one of desperation. "Jane, please, you have to listen to me. I was wrong, terribly wrong. Can't we just start over, forget all that happened?" he pleaded, his voice a mix of regret and fear. I looked at him, the man I once thought I knew, and felt nothing but detachment. "Start over? After everything you did? Alex, you don't seem to understand. It's over. There's nothing left to say." Before he could respond, a sharp knock interrupted our standoff. Two men, faces stern and purposeful, stood at my doorstep. "Are you Jane Harper? We're here about the debts your husband accrued. He's been borrowing money, making some risky deals, and it's time to settle up." The news didn't shock me as much as it might have before. Alex's capacity for deception seemed boundless. But I was prepared, the pain and betrayal I had endured had forged a resilience I never knew I had. I invited them in, offering a seat but not comfort. "I understand this is a difficult situation, but I'm afraid you're knocking on the wrong door." Alex's face went pale, his eyes darting between me and the creditors, the reality of his situation sinking in. I calmly presented the divorce papers, the ink dry but the words echoing the finality of our severed ties. "As you can see, we're no longer connected legally. Any debts he incurred are his and his alone. We made it explicitly clear in our divorce agreement, no claims on each other's assets or debts." The creditors scanned the documents, their expressions turning from frustration to understanding. "Seems like you've got everything in order, ma'am. We're sorry to bother you. We'll take this up with Mr. Alex Harper directly." As they stood up to leave, Alex reached out, desperation clear in his voice. "Jane, please, you can't let them do this. I'm ruined without your help." I looked at him, a man drowning in the consequences of his own greed and deceit. "Alex, you made your choices. Now you have to live with them. It's time you faced your own storms." With the closing of the door, the chapter of Alex and Elaine finally ended, their presence in my life nothing more than a harsh lesson learned. The dawn of this new day wasn't just the rising of the sun. It was the rising of a stronger, wiser me, a woman who had weathered the storm and emerged not just intact, but empowered.